Hi guys and girls, I'm Obsidian Ant and welcome back to No Man's Sky. As you can tell, I'm back on the PC version of the game and I'm slowly making my progress towards the centre of the galaxy. There's a lot to see, but perhaps not so much to do, yet somehow I still managed to get distracted. And as you can see here, there's been a few changes made to the PC version of the game that is fast making it my favourite version. And I really do feel that as modders get their hands on this game, they're going to turn it into a true epic. At this point, I was still in my original ship, despite finding a few wrecks, as well as having the pre-order ship still in my inventory. I didn't want to upgrade just yet until I'd got all of the hyperspace recipe. Now, as you can imagine, I'm quite a way behind on the PC version when compared to my progress on the PS4 version, but that's just how it goes when you don't settle on a single platform. I have, however, been pretty fortunate on both versions of the game with the number of garden worlds that I've found. I've come across quite a lot of them, and in fact I've found more lush planets like this than I have decent barren worlds. But sooner or later, I guess that was going to change. But not just yet. This one here was also a very nice and very unusual looking planet. For some reason, these ones with the vibrant green terrain remind me a lot of Outcast. I don't know how many of you actually remember that game, but it was one of the very, very good games from the late 90s, early 2000s. I do hear that there is a remake on that game coming along. Looking forward to seeing that one. As you can see here, this world was quite toxic. Didn't stay here too long because of that. Ultimately, in the end, it does tend to get a bit frustrating when all you're doing is recharging both your hazard suit as well as your protection suit. And the Sentinels here did attack me, despite the fact of being quite calm. I guess they got a little bit annoyed of me keep harvesting all the plutonium. Then again, my ship was entirely out of fuel, so I needed enough to replenish its stock. Caves are a very good place to do that, although one thing I have found, and I believe many other people have found this too, is regardless of which planet you go to, many of the caves look almost identical to each other. This cave will repeat itself again and again in terms of its appearance from planet to planet. However, I have found quite a few nice variations, including one that was completely submerged underwater. But it seems to take quite a while to come across those types of variations. So with that in mind, along with the toxicity of this planet, I decided to move on sooner rather than later. At this point, you can see that I've finally replaced my ship with the pre-order bonus, no less. And there's actually two reasons for that. One is because of the constant nagging at the bottom right of the screen. In the end, it literally nags you every 10 seconds or so. But beyond that, on this save, I'm on the Atlas path, and I've just managed to collect the hyperspace blueprint. And so, with that in hand, I could upgrade to this ship, knowing that I wouldn't bug out or glitch, or any other related problem that people have actually been reporting on. Now, I don't know how many of you are actually playing the PC version of this game, but it is getting a very good following within the modding community. In fact, there's websites out there with all manner of mods now. And the number of mods seem to be growing by the day. They range from graphical enhancements to inventory changes to mods that affect the stats of either your character, your multi-tool, or even your ship. Now, so far, I've only actually installed one of those mods. It's a really nice one, and to be honest, it totally changes the feel of the game. You saw some hints of it earlier, and you're just about to see the full effect of it in a moment. Here I got another inventory upgrade, still quite behind on this, but I did pick quite a few up later on this planet. So, as to that mod then, it's one that affects the ship. It's got quite a lot of traction within the community at the moment. In fact, quite a few people suggested it in the comments section. And for me, it fixes what I find to be the biggest flaw within the game, the flight mechanics. By default, you can't get close to the ground. There's a floor limit. You can't actually go below, and it's impossible to crash. What this mod does is completely remove that, and you can now fly as close to the ground as you like. You do risk crashing into things, but really, that's what flight is all about, isn't it? This brings the thrill and the exhilaration into flight, and you can dodge over hills, through canyons, and under little archways, and even, as you'll see later on, fly directly into caves. And although you won't see it on this video, with this mod you can even fly underwater. And that, of course, totally changes the dynamic of the water worlds you come across. Now, I've mentioned before that I really don't understand why Hello Games put a limit on how low you can actually go. It doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of gameplay. other than that they wanted to make the game very arcadey, or they assumed that people just weren't interested in flying, or at least they were incapable of flying. But there could be a technical reason for it. As you can see here, when you're close to the floor, the pop-in is actually quite bad. And this seems to be a limitation on the engine, or at the very least it seems to be a limitation that Hello Games have artificially put on the engine to ensure that it runs on all hardware types. Because the game is inherently procedurally generated, all the terrain, all of the plants, everything you see effectively gets generated by that procedural generation algorithm, and it only happens when you get within a certain visual distance of it. It's not something that you can really see when you're down on the ground, but it's certainly something that you can see when you're in your ship, and when you're doing a low flight, it becomes readily apparent. Now, I really did actually like this planet a lot, and I did ultimately move on a little bit too early, and I've jumped a few systems away by now. I would actually be tempted to return to this planet if there was any way to easily discover it again. And the reason I'd like to return here is because this planet was chock full of inventory upgrades. Travelling along in the ship, I only had to go a very short distance before I found one followed by another. And right there you can see one of the problems with the low flight mod, and that's crashing into the terrain. Sometimes it seems it's a little bit closer than it actually is. It can be a little bit difficult to judge. So if you're playing on the PC version and you want access to this mod, I will link it in the video description below. It's very easy to install. It's just one file that you need to copy into the game directory. Early on I mentioned about flying inside of caves. Right here I had the opportunity and just couldn't avoid the temptation. Unfortunately it was a little bit too of a shallow cave, so I ended up landing in it instead of actually flying through it. But nonetheless, you can see here the ship is stuck right inside the cave, and I was curious what it was going to be like to get back out again without the ability to fly backwards on your spaceship. So early on I spoke about all the lush garden worlds I'd actually found. In fact, I was finding them pretty much one after the other, but since then they seem to have long disappeared, and now I'm finding barren world after barren world. And to be honest, I'm quite curious as to how many people start off the game like this. It's quite possible that you start the game on a barren world and find nothing but these types of worlds in your first few systems. In fact, I suspect that some players could have put many hours into the game and never found any garden world at all. If that's happened to you or anyone you know, do let me know, because I'd really like to hear about it. Ultimately, that's one of the problems of making everything just a little bit too random in nature. There's always the chance that some people are not going to see some of the best things within the game for a very long time, if ever. Let's read this then. I see a strange vision. A small winged creature lands on the very top of the monolith. Suddenly, its eyes glow red, and in its head revolves in a full circle. It screams for mercy in an ancient voice that wants itself dead. The poor animal has clearly broken its neck, but the monolith's power of possession still animates it. I wonder if the right thing to do would be to shoot it and put it out of its misery. And that is exactly what I did, and of course I get a bit of a reward for that. So off to the cave then. My ship is still in there, facing into the cave, not out, and without the ability to reverse. I thought it was going to be a bit of a laugh to try and get the ship back out again. So this low flight mod has made its way into the game very early on into its release cycle. No Man's Sky has only really been out a few weeks, which means that given time there should be a lot of very impressive mods indeed. One I'm looking forward to the most, no idea if it's a possibility, but something I'd like to see, is a complete overhaul of the game's flight mechanics. Now, the ability to fly low to the terrain is a big improvement over what we had by default. What I'd really like to see though is a complete revision to give you complete control over your ship, the ability to fly both backwards and forwards, to effectively give you 6 degrees of freedom. So this is something I'm hoping a modder comes up with very soon, but it may actually take a bit of time. I wouldn't have thought it's that easy to implement, if indeed it's even possible to implement. So let's see what happens then when we try and fly a ship that's stuck inside a cave, when that ship only has the ability to fly forwards. And as to be expected, it bounces and ricochets all over the place. Fortunately, it doesn't take too much damage, so it is possible to get back out again. Looks a bit silly perhaps, but nonetheless I'm curious to find a large cave that I can fly this ship deeply into. And so I continue to make my way towards the centre of the galaxy, system by system, planet by planet, and ultimately I'm not in any hurry to get there. I'm enjoying the journey, and I'm looking forward to the much needed improvements that will hopefully come from both Hello Games and the modding community. For what it's worth, I completely agree with all of the points and issues that have been raised about this game, but ultimately I feel that its fate isn't already sealed and that it does have a potentially bright future, albeit with perhaps a much smaller audience than was initially expected. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys and girls next time.